Welcome to episode 7 of the Voice Break podcast. My guest today, Matty, is. I don't know whether to call him a riff lord or a jacket lord, but I know that he carries two riffs for every jacket that he has. So come to Matty, he'll give you some tasty riffs.
I try
What's
my
going on, Matty?
best. Not too much. How are you?
Pretty good. It's a fine. I almost said Saturday morning, but it's a Florida morning. And I'm a Florida guy, so watch out, whatever that means. So yeah, happy we could connect, and I was really entranced with your work. So
Thank you.
I'm really eager to dive into more about your process and kind of the approach that you have in creating.
Definitely. Just let me know what you want to know.
So much more than I can ask, to be honest. So first things first, I witnessed kind of the development over the past. I think you said it was 7 years or more.
It's 10, 15, just depending on when you actually show what you're looking into, I suppose. I want to say my first EP is probably going on 12, 13 years. So I'd say about 15.
About 15 years. That's amazing. And what was the first thing that got you started into this whole thing?
I would say my older brother. He had brought a lot of metal music, specifically bands like The Chariot was a big one back in the day. And then there were things like Silverstein and Emery and AFI um, that just kind of triggered my interest a little bit. I know he listened to a lot of like Himsa and Evergreen Terrace. So I had a little bit of a decently well-rounded approach on metal. At first, I was like, "What the heck is that?" And then it just kind of grew on me over the course of time.
Yeah,
Um, and then, yeah, in high school, started my first band and everything. Started to play live, and everything just kind of went up from there.
just kind of happened. That's
hmm
awesome. What was the first thing that you did in the band?
Vocal.
Vocal.
Yep. So the first band that I had, I'm trying to remember, we changed our name like 3 times. Um, I believe Berlin Skies was what we ended up calling ourselves in the long run.
Hmm.
And I did vocals for that. But then when I really started to dive into stuff, it was when I was with my band that actually had my little brother on guitar. We were Ship Meet Glacier, which then eventually became Inavista. Um,
Hmm.
and that was fun. That was a good time.
That's some good names there. Who?
Thank you.
How did you guys come up with that? I mean, it's really good naming
Uh,
convention.
Ship Meet Glacier was literally just Titanic inspired. It was an
Oh,
introduction of the ship to the glacier. Uh, I it came across my mind one day when I think the Titanic was on, and I was like, that'd be pretty cool name.
as things go. That's interesting. So everyone kind of has their origin story as whatever they do in their creative process. Like every every vocalist has like a, oh, this is kind of what happened. Or oftentimes it's not even that like big a deal. It's just kind of like, I know Mikhail, Mikhail. I don't know how to say his name, but the lead vocalist of Opeth.
Okay. Yeah.
It was kind of like, Opeth, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was kind of like no one wanted to sing, and he was like, "I guess I'll do it." But then he ended up being like extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
So, and personally, I think your vocals are extraordinary. I think
Thank
they're
you.
like, it takes a a certain kind of delivery for me to
hmm
say, oh yeah, that's something I'll listen to. And you definitely have that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know it's been an evolution. Actually, I know we were talking about one thing that you said was recently you kind of maybe overdid it in the vocals. You were kind of recovering, but it's been a
Oh yeah,
process,
definitely. Yeah,
right?
if I don't properly warm up, which I made the mistake of thinking I had warmed up enough and kind of push it past the extent that I needed to for the day, and
Yeah,
took a little bit of recovery.
yeah, that can happen. So that's interesting. So it's not often that I talk to someone who, well, really is into this kind of vocal. To be honest, a lot of my students are more on the clean side, oftentimes like bluegrass, like classic rock kind of thing, which is a little sad to me because of how interesting harsh vocals are. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to know, like, start to where we are now. What has been that process for you?
It's been a lot of, unfortunately, it's starting, I'd say, been a lot of painful discoveries.
Mm,
When you first started vocals, just trying to adjust where everything comes from. Really started up here, could feel it consistently, had to give myself a break, come back to it, and it was kind of that constant motion for a while. And then, trying to sing, trying to scream, a lot of times if I'd scream improperly, being able to hit certain notes while I was singing was impossible. My voice would just crack the whole time.
mm,
Uh, and I'd even say, even more recently, I finally feel like I started to dial in more of my like singing vocals,
mm.
um, which has improved my screaming technique because I
No
finally
kidding.
figured out where I needed to really adjust to hold power and control. And then I just applied that to what I do for screaming, and it's starting to come together even more.
Cool. That's really interesting because a lot of times people who start with harsh vocals
Hmm.
maybe go into some clean, but a lot of time people like bands just have a screamer, right?
Hmm.
Kind of just stay in the lane. But it's really heartening to hear how you dialing in your clean vocals actually helped your heavy vocals like substantially.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really about if you understand, I suppose, the diaphragm where you're putting pressure on and you can adjust. I personally don't know like the ins and outs of fry vocal versus, what do you call it? I don't know why I can't think of the other vocal style. But
Oh, gotcha.
um, pretty much the different styles of like harsh vocal where things kind of come from, and how it's projected. I personally have not had any training on anything, so I don't know terminology wise what I'm actually experiencing. I can kind of describe how it feels sometimes, but that's the best I have. But in figuring out how to sing better, it's allowing me to adjust appropriately to make sure I'm still keeping from ruining my voice. Doing
Mm,
things properly, I suppose, to make sure that, um, like when I started off, when I said I was screaming and then I couldn't hit a lot of certain notes, especially higher notes, without my voice cracking. Now that I've adjusted my singing and utilized that towards my screaming, those high notes aren't a strain or struggle anymore. After screaming, I can just go right into them without feeling like I'm going to crack or anything like that.
that's awesome. Yeah, key differentiator there. And
Hmm.
so this is actually kind of encouraging to people who like well might not be too well versed in the vocal thing and coming from a learner's perspective, like thinking you have to get lessons. There are a
Hmm.
lot of people who do. And well, part of the pain of it is that you come into the field, or even just having aspirations, and you see all these people talking about you need to learn this and that, and you're not doing fry well, you're not doing false chord or whatever.
False chord, that's what it was that I couldn't think of.
Yeah, and so that's actually, it's almost kind of a blessing not to, in a way. I mean, it definitely can help to get teaching,
Definitely.
and well, I say that as a teacher myself. But there's a certain way you want to go about it.
Hmm.
And for you, it was about having almost like a communication between you and your body. Like, is this working? Is this feeling good? Right.
Yeah.
And and at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, just that trial and error.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And I think that makes a lot of sense as to why your vocals are where they are now, because you've listened, right?
Hmm.
So
Just keep trying to evolve. I mean, if you're not making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, you're just going to stay stagnant anyway. So, kind of just being okay with, like, I made a mistake. How do I not do that next time? And how do I improve on it? And just keep moving up that ladder.
wise words.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you mentioned some influences that, well, most of the influences you mentioned, I'm a little unfamiliar with.
Mhm.
But I do know that recently, Devin Townsend has been a major influence for you.
Yeah, it just a buddy of mine, actually, I would say maybe 3 years ago. A buddy of mine showed me some of Devin Townsend stuff. Um, and my biggest thing with him was seeing more of the live performance, just capabilities, and sometimes the simplicity of some of his stuff, and how that kind of stood forward when he used his voice to kind of carry the song rather than the instruments as much. Um, he creates some really cool dynamic in a lot of his stuff between the instruments and the vocals and just the way he carries himself.
Yeah, I would agree. That's really interesting, actually, because it was around that time I discovered him as well. Like, I was kind of being suggested by YouTube, but
Hmm.
for like a couple years. But I was really, I was really like almost like a gang wars kind of thing. Like, I wouldn't listen to anything but what I liked. It's really,
I understand that.
really anal about that. And so I saw this Devin Townsend Joker on my YouTube recommended, but finally someone I know recommended him to me, I think, and I was like, okay, let's see what this is about. And you're right, it's a really unique contrast
Mhm.
that he makes with the vocal and instrument. And Genesis was the one that changed me. I was like, okay, that's crazy. I actually saw him just before lockdown, like a week before lockdown,
Oh, heck yeah.
3 years ago. Yeah, it was really cool. So, how do you feel like that influence changed the way that you approach your creative process?
Um, when it comes to my creative process, I always pull influences from everything I hear. So if I hear a song that, let's say tomorrow, I hop on, find someone's music and hear something really cool out of it, I'll it will kind of be stuck somewhere here. And when I start playing, I'll just throw little twists and spins off of that just into my writing. But a lot of times I go into my music with a story in mind already before I write anything. So although I do carry influences from other bands and musicians, a lot of times it's based off of what I'm trying to convey emotionally for the story. So it kind of has influence, um, but it doesn't take over for me, so to speak. Uh, Everything with Behold the Tarantella is a story from beginning to end, minus the first EP that was almost like a experimenting what I can do, what I can write. But once you hit the particle rendition, it's a storyline starting with a character, the life and death of that character, and then the next album being the next chapter towards reincarnation of that character in a different universe. And then the album after that is almost like the final pieces of the puzzle. That one's The Stars That Guide You, which was my most recent release for album. And it's a full instrumental. There's no vocal or anything on it.
Hmm.
And that one is um, each of the astrological signs that exist. So it's almost like if you were to play a video game and you were picking your character traits. I almost view that as like, this is the last piece of the puzzle. They were born at this time, so this is their character traits that will transfer to the character when they're reincarnated.
Interesting. So, do you plan to have like the next phase of this will be the characters will have will have those traits, and then like sonically, the traits will be exhibited there?
Yeah, so I believe I carried a little bit of a couple of people in my life's influences, so to speak. My wife in particular, I kind of catered toward Taurus, and just like kind of like me, my wife can be hard-headed, but the determination, the drive to get somewhere, and it's almost a straight line as opposed to everyone else. There's no delineation a lot of times that I noticed with her. She's not sitting here being like, well, if I do this, I can go here and do this, and then I'll eventually get here, which is kind of me. I kind of just go with the flow of things, and she's like, straight line. I'm going to get there the way I want to and the fastest way possible. I kind of built that into this new character with which I called Ether in this album, which the first track I released, Tuesdays Coming, actually proclaims the name of the character Ether in it. And I want this character to kind of be androgynous. So it can be depicted as male or female, whatever resonates best with the listener, so that they can kind of help mold their own story of that character as they listen to it. But it's going to be a slightly darker album than my previous ones, but there's definitely going to be those hints of like, I guess, light here and there, so you get a little bit of that like joyous kind of feeling, but then a lot of things will be unnerving for the most part, or there'll be something a little bit just darker to it.
That's really interesting. That's very cool. So,
Thank you.
absolutely. Man, there's like 5 questions I want to ask about. Let me ask the one most pertinent right now. With the theme being mainly dark and unnerving,
Mhm.
perhaps without spoiling too much, I mean, this is completely up to you, but
Yeah.
why do you feel that is?
So the character development in this one I wanted to portray separate from my last character. My last character was very much about so Adam, ATOM, was my first character. Um, Pretty much went through life finding love and harmony, losing that love, falling into like a deep depression, and then finding a new purpose and helping other people find that love. And that was more of like a, I guess, a personal reflection of myself. Like, I want to just constantly help people. Um, and I kind of wanted to portray a little bit of that in the first character for Adam. But after, I would say after playing like D&D with some friends and like developing different characters, I wanted to branch out of that spectrum and create kind of a new world, a new idea. So Ether has that determination, but Ether is also willing to do what Adam wouldn't, as in, like, if there's not so great people that exist, Ether wouldn't care about getting rid of them in some way, shape, or form, even in some unsavory ways, just because they see the big picture as it will help everybody, even if they take care of things in not so savory methods.
Interesting.
So it's slightly darker just because they have a different mindset.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I appreciate you saying that. That actually adds to the intrigue. Personally, I find it when I know some of the founding principles of a story,
Mhm.
but I don't know the details per se, that drives me to learn more. So that's really interesting. I can't wait for the release. I'll probably copy it. I'll be honest.
That's okay.
But but so by the sounds of it, when it comes to influences,
Mhm.
it sounds like you draw maybe, well, maybe not too like particularly, but you draw where this kind of sound would be appropriate.
I guess, what do you mean?
So the way you said, there's something earlier like how the influence is there, but it doesn't take over,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Hmm.
So would you say that you kind of place this influence sonically, like the sonic characteristics, when it's appropriate?
Yes, yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I think that comes across. And that's a very good way of staying true to you
Mhm.
and staying true to your influences. I'm curious to know, what do you hear in Ether that you could point out and say, that is this person or that's this influence?
In terms of like musical influence?
Yeah.
Well, I would say so. In Tuesdays Coming in particular, um, that particular track, I'd say, pulls a little bit more Between the Barrier and Me, a little bit of Devin Townsend, a little bit of Veil of Maya, kind of all into one there. But then I also have one track that's unfinished right now that's kind of has a little bit of a double meaning. It's a very personal track to me. And I don't know, could be silly to other people, but the reality is I lost um, a cat that my wife and I had last year, and or no, beginning of this year, um, and it's been super rough. So I kind of poured my everything into that, and I used what song had kind of that most impact and influence, where I felt had the most emotional pull for me, in the way the vocals were used, in the way the instruments were used, and kind of used that as an influence in my first first thing that ever came to mind was Intake by Volumes. That whole track is, I mean, the chorus line is, let's see, he always says, "You are everything." I'm trying to remember what he says for a second. Guilty me, I treated you like shit, but you were all I ever wanted in me, and I owe you it too because I missed my last chance to say that I love you. And it's just very impactful and very powerful, especially the way it's there's no singing vocal, it's all scream vocal. It's almost like all ounces of passion that that person has is directly in everything they say because they're screaming, they're putting all of their breath, everything into it. And I felt I wanted that kind of impact on it. And surprisingly, it's become very difficult for me to finish the song because of that impact I'm trying to put into it, which hits harder when I write it. And that one, I'm looking forward to releasing, but it's a tough one. And I honestly don't even remember what you asked me now that I got on this tangent.
That's fine because I don't think I remember either. But well, there's a lot to say there. The power of there's a point of no return,
Mm-hmm.
and there are many emotions present where things like regret, I mean grief, and a slew of other things when you lose a member of your family like that.
Mm-hmm.
That really that's a pivot point in your life, right?
Yep.
And I can't imagine. I always thought that I would write a song when my dog passed away, but it was beyond me to do that, I feel. And that's
It's
interesting, actually,
so
'cause,
hard.
yeah, I can't imagine. I lost my dog early this year as well, actually.
I'm sorry to hear that. It's tough.
Yeah, it was not easy.
Mhm.
It was not easy. It forces change. You can't go through something like that and come out the same.
Absolutely not.
And well, I commend you for channeling that into your music.
Yeah,
That to me is admirable.
it honestly, the first thing I did with it is I just wrote it out in a poem. You know, something that I just felt like I need to honor her in some way. Like we have a shrine in our living room, like with photos of her and stuff. And I felt like I just needed to honor how pure of a soul she had. She was one of those cats that we had her for 12 years. And she was one of those cats that anybody would walk into the room, anybody would walk into the house. She just wanted to love them. I've never heard that cat hiss at another cat or a person. She never swatted at anything unless she was like playing with them. Just every aspect of her was just pure happiness, love. Her entire 12 years. I've never met a single person that met Zelda that wasn't like, I love this cat. So she was something else. And writing about it, I think just it doesn't fill a void, but it helps me express all the feelings that have been pent up.
Yeah. And you need to do that. I mean, that amount of emotion is nuclear.
Oh yeah,
This
it'll
Captain
take
said.
over.
That's interesting, really. I find a lot of coincidence in people I interact with, especially like more and more these days.
Hmm.
My dog was actually quite the same way. Well, early on in his life, he was troubled. I'm pretty sure he was in dogfighting. He's like riddled with
Ooh,
scars. Has a broken humerus where like it's almost like punching out.
oof.
So we had a troubled start. He was super defensive of me. But then, actually, one point just before COVID, I kind of had like a change of heart.
Huh.
And it was good timing because then I took him in. And so we lived with a cat and a dog as well, and with my two roommates. And he was like, I don't know, it's like he was like redeemed, so to speak. Like we'd wake up in the morning and he would make rounds, like saying good morning to everyone. Like you, not just everyone, just like I don't know what happened, but that's really how he was in nature, like in his true nature, and just a model of love, like how to treat people.
That makes a huge impact on you as, their companion.
Yeah,
Yeah, it definitely is something that, when you experience that firsthand, especially from, I mean, something that isn't a human. Humans have all these different factors and thought processes, but something that's as pure as nature coming out and showing you that aspect of life, it's hard not to want to reciprocate and replicate that into your everyday.
yeah,
So it's powerful when an animal does that.
it is, and it that alone forces you to like question a lot of things because it feels so good to give lovingly, give out of the goodness of nature, right?
Absolutely.
And then I get the feeling that you've experienced this as well, but you start to find that like the way you treat anything is how you feel internally. It's almost like treating others is treating yourself.
Absolutely. I know, like, my wife, um, and her mom practice Wicca to some extent, and there's always that saying that whatever you put out comes back threefold. And it does every time. You put out, some negative energy, you're going to get hit hard with it. You put out something positive and it's going to come back to you. Now, whether it comes back to you right away, like, that's to be seen, but it will come back, and it always has a way of doing so.
I agree. And I experienced that more and more. Actually, that was why I started just almost like not exactly ignoring fear and negativity, but just kind of like leaving it by the wayside, just over there because it does not benefit me.
Hmm.
And I think back to all the times and I'm just like, I've experienced what you're saying and I'm thinking if that's true, then why don't we just take it all away and just be happy and be real and enjoy life, and then life will align itself rather than be negative and like worry and all this and that. It does you nothing but negative.
Yeah, and the I mean, one main thing is, we have so many external influences, and I think that's what drives our mind to wander between the negativity and positivity and finding that balance within ourselves, is because there's so many external factors that kind of put up roadblocks along the way.
That's definitely true. We can't help but experience.
Hmm.
So it's a very good thing that we have art.
Absolutely.
Because if we didn't have art, where would we put all this shit?
I mean, I just think that's part of the human condition, though, is just imagination, creativity. It's something that we have that allows us to, I guess, realign ourselves.
That's really interesting. I can say actually part of my journey in singing was finding that aspect out for myself. I didn't really know about it. And I didn't consider art as something that I would ever do.
Yeah.
But funny enough, I got into singing because I was just curious how people did it. Like, I just wanted to understand. But along the way, I found that, well, the power of music and creating is the ability to traverse your inner landscape and to heal.
Hmm.
And it's amazing.
It is. Music does a lot for us. And even just, I try to tell people, sing once a day, even if you're in your room and no one else can hear you. That it makes all the difference in the world. Like if you compare a day where you didn't sing at all that day, uh, it can be silly. You can sing the most random, obtuse, whatever you want to sing. But if you go a day without it, compared to a day where you just sing something like that, it makes a difference in how you feel for that day. Uh, I don't know if it's the vibrations. I don't know what it is. I mean, you could even be tricking yourself into being happy for a moment because it takes some kind of energy and force to project that. And I guess to some extent, I would say, like, if you had, some blockage of some form and you're projecting, you're forcing it out. I mean, it's got to some extent feel healing in some shape or form.
Hmm.
At least that's how I perceive it.
Well, I think it's absolutely true. The way that we perceive things is totally a feedback loop.
Hmm.
It's like experience, and there's, well, on one side of the coin, there's the feedback between action and belief. So belief can influence action, and action can influence belief. And if you feel like you're blocked, and you do something that's like contrary to that, you're then believing that you can. Then you continue acting down that road, and that goes to all directions, negative as well.
Hmm.
But I believe that's absolutely true.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
That's interesting. So there's something that I wanted to ask about about this song. Oh, I've talked to a number of people who have had losses like this as well.
Mhm.
In part, trying to understand my own experience. And it stuck with me what you said about honoring your pet.
Mm.
I was watching some of Andrew Huberman podcast. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Oh wow. So Andrew Huberman's incredible. He's the head of neuroscience at Stanford.
Oh, cool.
But he has a
Heck
podcast
yeah.
where he kind of like bridges the almost Eastern practices, like meditation, that sort of thing, which is all very practical,
Mhm.
and science, which is totally numbers and stuff like that, but it's not all that practical, right? So he kind of bridges the gap, and I think it's incredible work. And he was talking about grief and how we perceive grief and how we can, well, how we can heal.
Mhm.
So the stages of grief, that's not exactly how it works. We found in research, but one thing that needs to happen that is considered like really, what's the word? That would be a surefire way to heal. Would be a condition where you feel, even though the physical is gone,
Mhm.
you still feel close. I'm curious, for the sake of this song,
Mhm.
what would that closeness sound like?
Hmm. Well, I mean, the portrayal in the track itself, uh, it's kind of hard to explain per se what that would sound like without showing you this song to really feel that emotion at its fullest. Um, a lot of it comes down to kind of that a couple things. The reminder that, it's better to have experienced that love than to not ever experience at all. And loss, death is a part of that experience. And whether you accept it or not, it's going to be there. Um, so rather than focusing on the fact that they're not there anymore, trying to focus on the fact that look at all the things you created together, all the times, memories they're there. They're going to be there forever until it's your time to go. And I already lost what the second thing was that I was going to say. I'm drawing a blank. Give me a second here. I'll see if I can get it, or else it could have just flown away on me. Oh. I may have lost it. What I was going to say.
That's okay.
I'll let you know if it comes back, but yeah, I think
No
I
worries.
may have lost that.
I think it's an interesting idea, and oftentimes, well, I hear, and I've been taught. I mean, I went to school for a little bit for vocal performance and some theory classes, and so oftentimes the approach that I have had and I have seen others have has been very mechanical in the
Mhm.
creation of music. I just think it's really powerful to imagine what the emotion and the story might sound like.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, when it comes to theory, it's one of those things that I've never had a full grasp on theory. I had a friend try to teach me it, and I'd come back the next day and I'd be like, dude, I don't remember what a C chord is. I don't, like, you're trying to teach me the cage theory, and I just can't, I can't get it down. I can't figure it out. I've always done everything by ear and what felt right to me. So whatever resonates and whatever sounds good to me is all I need when I write, because if I feel it and I hear it and those two things come together, like, that's all I need. And whether that's anything, overly complex or something super simple, it resonates. And to me, that's art, that's music. And there's definitely, you know, positives to learning theory. Like, sometimes if you want to convey emotion and you can't figure out how to convey an emotion, sometimes there's a key change of some form and, a different scale that you don't think about playing because it's not in your general realm of what you usually play. And just having the knowledge of this scale can make you feel this way can make a huge difference. But for myself, it's been difficult for me to learn those things uh, in terms of theory. But I understand where the mechanical aspect comes into play. Uh, I know there's one buddy of mine who he dove into theory, and for years on end, he couldn't complete a song that felt right. He was too focused on the theoretical aspects of how a song should be written or how something should sound. And it became very mechanical to where it never felt right to them, so they never released anything. So it took them a very long time to come to terms with balance, like the balance. You need a balance of theory, but if you're not conveying emotion, it's never going to feel right. So if you can figure out how to combine the two, that's that sweet spot for a lot of people.
That's so. Oh man, that is very true to life.
Yeah, definitely. Even goes back to the Eastern Western philosophy of that scientist.
Oh yeah, I hadn't even made that connection. Yeah, hold on, I actually have to write that down. I legitimately have to write that down because if I don't, that's actually gold.
I like gold.
Gold is gorgeous. Man, I like nuggets like that because when you can explain our experience in few simple words, that gets me riled up. Like I need to know why. So I appreciate you saying that.
Of course.
And I've experienced that myself. There's not a lot of music that I've made, I'll be honest.
Hmm.
The times that I have made music, it's been a battle. Like between I've been doing it right, like all the mechanical shit, this and that. And then, you know what I noticed? And I'm curious if you ever experienced this yourself, but with my longer stuff, there's a point at which I just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna do it my way. And that's the point at which it's sure to happen.
Yeah.
I did that with my last big one. I did that with my first big one. And you can definitely feel the battle.
Yeah.
But it's from that moment on, that's where I'm proud of everything I did there. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah. Yeah. Even sometimes I get stuck in like I said, in terms of like theory, I don't know a whole lot, but I've gotten stuck in writing, the storyline of a song and trying to convey that in the song and just being stuck on this one spot that just never feels right. And most of the time to get over it, either I'll start on a completely new song and leave that behind until something clicks, or I'll just try to branch to the next part and see if I can revise it later. But sometimes you get stuck and it just doesn't go anywhere until there's that one thing that clicks, and then you almost rewrite it all. It changes the whole aspect of what you started, and usually for the better. Or I know there's situations where I've been recording in my DAW, because a lot of times I don't write before I record. I just do it on the spot as I record and just let things flow. And if it doesn't work that day, I step away, go do something else, and come back to it. I don't like to hold on to too many ideas in my head, um, because a lot of it I tend to focus too heavily on for the longest time, and then I never figure out how to branch away from it. So that's usually when I get stuck the most, is when I'm sitting here like, I wrote this really cool riff, and then I'm stuck on that riff, and I got nothing else. But when I go into it being like, I have nothing in mind other than this is the story I want to convey, I open things up and just go for it. And if it doesn't work that day, that's all right. I'll come back to it tomorrow.
Wow. That's really interesting. Personally, I like working minimally, so the idea of just opening up just like getting down the recording's armed and you just go.
Hmm.
And if it works, it works. I love that. I think that's brilliant. There's actually there actually might be a scientific like parallel between the mechanical and the kind of abstract stuff that we've been talking about.
Hmm.
I read on neuroscience news recently that you can only keep track of 4 items of any kind at a time. After that, you start to estimate. The brain starts to estimate.
Okay. So rather
So
than having a actual tangible number or whatever, it just starts to fill in gaps.
yeah, it starts like if you see a group of 5 things, like 5 bottle caps, you're like, you can probably count individually, right? You can be like, oh,
Hmm.
that's definitely 5, or you can memorize the shape of 5. But then, what if there's an extra one you missed, right? Then it starts to get blurry.
Yeah.
And good luck after 7.
Huh. Interesting.
So I'm curious if we think to like, let's say you're in a recording, right?
Hmm.
this is purely from my curiosity, but your most recent recording, let's say,
Okay.
you said you don't like to keep too many thoughts in your head.
hmm
Were there more than four or less than four thoughts?
Probably less. I
Probably
kind of
less.
just
Okay.
do things on the spot. So like, I'll start off with, okay, cool. I made a really neat bass riff. Let's just lay down the bass riff, and I don't worry about any of the instruments until that's laid down. Okay, bass riff is done. Okay, how do I want the drums to match it? And I add the drums. It's like, okay, so those flow really nice together. Now let's layer on the guitar and see what I can come up with. And and I just kind of piece it all together from there and just work my way through the song.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So it's like you really just select an idea. You just take one. We're doing this. Put it down. Okay. And it's just one at a time. Like,
Yep. I'd say that's
that
about
makes a lot of
how
sense.
90% of my writing goes. Because if I try to write a whole song at once, a lot of times I'll go back to the beginning and forget what that first riff was. So I'll be like, yep, just jamming out, doing all my stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, that doesn't sound the way I remember it sounding the first time through.
Oh my god, it's so true. It's like, oh damn, because I've tried to write whole songs at once too. I'm really positive there's a way. It's just like you run into that sort of thing. You're like, there are problems with this approach. Whereas if you do it one at a time, you build this thing. Great, that works. And then from that point, everything's derivative.
Yeah, you
It's a
just
lot less
create
work.
your little transitions. Um, you're like, okay, this is the note I ended on. So where's the next piece? And just it's like piecing Legos together or a puzzle together. You're just like, I mean, a puzzle. I'd say Legos over a puzzle because Legos you have the ability to freeform. But you have your piece and you're like, that locks into place just right. And there are some pieces that won't, but you can always build off of it. And if you really want to, you can still deconstruct and go back to the beginning. But it kind of helps having that little bit of a foundation and then just build up from there.
Yeah. It's almost like the pieces are like made already, like they're just
Mhm.
there. Huh. And when you have tried to make a whole song at once, what was the experience like?
Usually it's jamming with, like, let's say I'll jam with a friend for a little bit, have a cool riff, be like, cool, let's come back to that riff. And then by the time we write everything else, we got to come back to it. And it doesn't sound the same. It's almost inevitably always how it goes, unless we, play that piece over and over and over before branching forward. And to the extent that it gets stuck, like you can't play that piece wrong because now you know it by heart.
Yeah.
But that's still the same aspect of if I went into my DAW and recorded that one piece because I'm doing that piece over and over and over before I move forward.
So the same thing happens.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, wow. Huh. Because I was thinking when I'm trying to make like a macro view, I'm like, okay, here's my A section, here's my B, and let's say A, whatever. We got this and this and this. And then it's just like the key differentiator there is the feeling that you have, that the feel that makes it right. You're like, well, I know this works because I feel what it goes with.
hmm
But when you have like a top down view, you can't hear it all at once.
Yeah.
So you're just like you're trying to make something, but the bricks are too big.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Spain. We'll get there someday. So that's my mission. But one thing I really wanted to ask is the instruments.
Mhm.
How much of those do you do yourself?
I do bass, guitar, keys if I need to do keys, vocal, and then I program the drums. So MIDI
Nice,
drums.
nice. What DAW do you use for that?
I use Reaper.
No kidding,
Yeah.
dude. I hated Reaper for programming drums. Like that was my nemesis.
Yeah, because I use Reaper and I use Easy Drummer in Reaper.
Okay.
And then I use bias effects for guitar and bass tone. I use Easy Mix with some of the effects. Joey Sturgis's gain reduction I use on my vocals, which if you haven't used that on your vocals, thing is a heaven sent. It's awesome.
Joey Sturgis.
Gain reduction. Yep. It pretty much does, I'd say, like 90% of the work for you, where like any parts that seem too soft or too loud, it auto levels them for you.
Oh wow.
It keeps everything nice and level. Um, and then, make minor adjustments from there. Uh, I'm trying to think. I think that's the majority of what I do, other than your like traditional like EQing and compression and stuff. Um, those are my main VSTs that I run.
That's wicked. I did
Yeah,
not know about that. Okay. That'll change a lot of things.
heck
I
yeah,
appreciate that.
no problem. I should say Melodyne is another one that I just recently started to use. I've been trying to use that more as a training VST than solely using it for my to pitch shift things. So
Hmm.
I'll do my vocal take, shift everything into key, sing along with that vocal take, remove it, and then redo it. And then minor adjustments from there, I'll pitch shift. But that way I'm forcing myself to learn exactly how I need to sing in key to have that control so that it just feels more natural the more I do it.
I gotta say, that's brilliant.
It's helpful.
Yeah, no doubt. I I've been lazy. I have Melodyne. I haven't used it, but I think
It's
that's really brilliant.
it's fun and simple, and I think can be a huge, uh, huge why can I think positive influence for musicians. It creates a easy learning as long as you know where you want your notes to be. Um, like me, I look at the A, uh, A sharp, E. I look at everything there on the side, and none of that makes sense to me. I'm really, really bad with all that. I know how to tune my guitar. I know what to tune it to. I just let my voice travel and hit, and if it's not hitting where I need to hit, I at least know where I'm close enough that I can either just shift a hair up or down. Like for me, just that little bit of visual change makes all the difference, but I personally don't know what key I'm singing in half the time or where I need to hit my pitch prior to looking at the piano roll on it.
Hmm. Interesting. That's brilliant. Like you do your vocal take, you adjust it, and basically give yourself a reference.
Hmm.
And so you're following along the reference, and that is a beautiful picture of feedback learning. And it's how I mean, people wouldn't altogether sing in key if we didn't have keys,
That's true.
right? So
Yeah,
using acoustic is, in principle, the same as using Melodyne to feed back into your understanding.
definitely.
That's a good way to think about it, because, I mean, with innovation, there's always pushback.
Hmm.
And the pushback is oftentimes from the ego. It's like, I want to feel like I'm the one doing it. But in principle, you're using the same thing. That's awesome.
That's like, I mean, it's like AI nowadays. AI branching into new facets and stuff, and it's like there's definitely a part of me that's pushing against it in some areas. But then again, at the same time, like another side of me is always seeing that can AI really replic- rep- replicate and emulate the emotional aspect and drive without it sounding too robotic and not personal? And that's the question that if AI can do that, I'm probably more worried about things other than music.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, the implications of that are pretty hefty, like widespread.
Hmm.
If it were just contained to music, uh, that's actually an interesting subject, because oftentimes people are worried about AI replacing them and this and that, but just because there's more functionality or accessibility to a certain sound people want, like, yeah, people are going to buy that stuff, right?
Definitely.
Especially if it becomes really good, but it's not going to keep you from wanting to create.
That's true. And even like you look at AI art from an artist perspective, and we already know that a lot of that is stolen to some extent and just generated from a mass amount of images that it's already seen. The plus side is I don't know if AI will ever be able to create something new, extending past what it knows. And that's where I get on that subject of like, if it does, we might have some more issues than there is that sentience factor of it surpasses what it knows and can create past the knowledge it's been given. Um, Whereas like artists, if AI steals something, which, it happens a lot, and I hope that it doesn't happen frequently because artists should get paid for their work, especially all their hard work that goes into things. Um, it it's one of those things that we can still create past the confines of what AI has. And as long as we're still able to do that, then AI could be used in a positive manner. It's just trying to figure out where we should be using it is the hard part.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And with when something is innovated, especially at the speed at which things are innovated these days,
It's wild.
it's
Technology.
insane.
Ooh.
It's wicked. The legislation is going to lag.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff is going to go under the radar. A lot of stuff that definitely shouldn't be happening. And then hopefully, you know, it gets regulated into where the legal use is beneficial.
Yes. I think everything that exists likely has a place somewhere. It's just a matter of figuring out where.
Yeah. I think of things like there is an AI called, I think it's kit.ai, but it's a pretty interesting concept because it's like the next autotune, where instead of just autotune, it changes your voice to sound how, like, whatever. Like, you can sound like a pop star, you can sound like a rock singer, you can do all this kind of stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah, very
I don't know how
interesting.
well it works. I haven't used it, but
I mean, I know, like, even if you've used TikToks, the small voice changer effects that exist on there are sometimes a little too accurate, like what they can do. So I
huh,
can imagine that stuff like that could do some crazy things with it.
yeah. If if it were actually like quality
Mhm.
and provided the voices there are used with permission, how would you feel about using something like that for your music?
I don't think I would. Just personally, I thrive myself off of authenticity and trying to do more and more myself than trying to have all these, I don't know, added things to the mix. That's why when it comes to, my music, I write, I record, I mix, I master. So I do all of that myself. And then when it comes to video work, I do all my video editing, I do all my photography, I do all my digital artwork myself. I want to just kind of do like a one man everything. I don't want to rely on anything too heavily. And I don't, not that I would say rely on people, but like the last album that I released was more of a community album in the aspect that each individual track that I wrote, of each astrological sign, I actually asked someone of that astrological sign to perform on my track. So each of the tracks have another member on that track of that sign to try to correlate, like, I don't know what you're going to bring to the table. I know you're a musician. I know you're of that sign. And I hope that this speaks well enough to you that you can just throw something down that you feel is you. So, I have people throw in, like, on Taurus, I have someone throwing an organ synth on it, which totally out of the norm for what I would anticipate, but it sounds great. It's something that's just well out of my usual scope of musicians. Um, but the only downside that I would say of putting that together is a lot of people don't have the same drive I have. And so there's that anticipation and waiting. And for some people, it took much longer than what I was hoping to get a response, to get that information, which I think it possibly pushed back my release date. But I was so far along that if I could just hold out for those couple of people, it would be worth it in the end. Um, that's where doing more myself instead of relying on things like for instance, like AI. I I gave I think it was like BandLab is what it's called. There's
Mhm.
like a free AI mastering that they do. And I was like, I'll give it a shot. Like, what's the harm in me submitting my track to get a free master of it based on what AI hears with all of the, frequencies. And I found that for me, it didn't benefit me. And that's okay. But I can see where it can for other people. Because I put in the work and effort myself to get nearly an identical sound than what that mastering does. So if I can hit that myself, I learned all the techniques, then even though that's a great tool and I think people will benefit from it, it still tells me that I have that ability to be authentic and still do these things without the need of that. And the more I personally can learn, the more tools I have to teach other people other things in the future. And I'd rather know more and continue to learn than to take these shortcuts along the way.
Wow. That is very admirable.
Thank you.
I can see the benefit too. I mean, I've used it, the AI mastering, because, well, many reasons, right? Partly curiosity. Let's see what this thing can do.
Mm-hmm.
But also because I don't have the tools myself, and I'm like, this is going to save me time.
And I think that's where it's helpful for a lot of people. Like, for instance, if, let's say you have, I don't know, a contract of some form with someone that you have to be releasing something so frequently. You take that mastering aspect out of things. You take, a lot of that mixing aspect and throw it into the hands of something else. It's going to allow you to produce more quickly, which there's definitely a huge benefit there. The only downside is you can't make those minor adjustments with those aspects. So it's quick, it's helpful, but if there are some things that you really want to change about it, you don't have that freedom to do so.
That's true. Yeah.
At least right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Who knows? You talked about that you like to learn these things to have the capacity to express your authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, you like to have the ability to teach others.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Well, my overall goal that I've had for a long time is I wanted to create what I call a press kit collaborative. Kind of my own business where if I can learn every facet of what someone needs as an EPK to start their band, their music project, to get out there. So they need what? A website. With that website, they're going to need professional photos. They're going to need a solid biography. They're going to need typically 3 tracks, mixed, mastered, decent enough quality to get out there, and get their name out there. And, if I can figure out, I think one of the main things that I need to figure out now is website building, which is another facet that I'd love to get into, is figure out coding, figure out how to build something from scratch so that I can make everything specifically catered to that music project or that band. So doing a one-time, just simple, like, here's a one-time fee. It gets you this package. You get your website. You get your photos. You get your biography. You get the 3 songs mixed and mastered, ready to go. And then from there, like, I would assume over the course of time, I'd end up having some connections to send them to as well. So you have your connections. Now, for one flat fee, I took care of 90% of what musicians have a hard time building out the gate so that they can do something with their music if they want to go somewhere. I mean, you want to book a show. If you have an EPK set up, venues are going to look at that and they're going to see, oh, they're good to go. Like, I've listened to their music. They would do great here. I see that they're professionally, everything's built. Everything looks professional on their end. Like, as not great as it is, first impressions are huge in the music industry and a lot of other industries, that if you don't have a lot of those, you're just kind of tossed to the side. So if I can do all these things, create it in a manner of an achievable price range, something that it's like, okay, if I get a broad spectrum of like, what do photographers charge for a photo shoot for them? What do people charge to build websites? Get a full layout and then bundle it together at a discounted price for everything together for everyone. It's giving, I don't know, just giving a lot in a one-stop shop, basically. I want to do everything for everyone that I can because I didn't have that when I started.
You could do a lot with that.
So,
a lot of times we give to our former selves.
yeah.
In doing so, actually propels us forward, as well as bringing other people with us. It's an interesting quality of humans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people in general, like, this is super, like, not supernatural in that sense, but like, it's natural for us to kind of do that. And it's an interesting concept. I'm kind of unsure why, but maybe it really is just like we were talking earlier, like, the way you treat people is the way you treat yourself.
Mm-hmm. And there's definitely still like two sides to that, so to speak. Like, there are people who will use it to help others. There are people who use it to climb on others. And fortunately enough, I know a lot of people who use the method of climbing on others to reach their way to success might not see it for themselves. But I can almost guarantee a lot of those people, unfortunately, live relatively lonely and false versions of themselves in their lives. Whereas people who are willing to, extend that hand to all the people around, even if they're not, making millions, billions of dollars and doing all this thing, they're fulfilled in their life, in their success. Giving back is a very fulfilling feeling. And I would much rather be someone who has enough to get by and can share that with everyone else than hold all of it for myself and have no one around to spend it with.
Completely agree. Yeah. It's sad some people live barren lives like that.
Unfortunately,
It's sad. Well, I think I speak from experience in saying it's not even that you want to live like this. You think you have to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know, like, high school me versus me now, I was so ego driven in high school, and I don't. Part of me wonders if it is just surroundings, what school brings to the table, whether that's your teachers, whether that's your peers, just the overall, um, I don't know, the overall energy output of school itself. But I know when I was in high school, like maybe it was puberty too, who knows, like I just know that when I was back in the day there, like there were facets of me that I would never want to replicate nowadays. Like I had such an ego. I thought way too highly of myself. I wanted to, like, don't get me wrong, there were still facets of like, what can I do to help these guys? Like, I would love to be able to see these guys do this. But then there was still that aspect of me of like, but if I do that for them, then they might surpass me. And like that was my mindset in high school of like, I needed to be here and these guys can come along with as long as I'm still here and they're here and not the other way around. And it sucks because looking back on how much of a difference it would have made if I just thought differently at the time. But then again, those experiences bring me here today and what I do now and how I've changed that outlook of I'm not here to trample on someone else's dreams and hopes. I'm here to do what I can to be like, here, let's skip over all these bad things that I dealt with so you don't have to because you don't want any of this.
Understood. Understood. I feel the same way. I mean, that's why actually I got into teaching, and it's funny. I well, I guess it is interesting. I'm curious if you'll experience this yourself. I can imagine you probably will in your business, but people come to you with a certain kind of problem, right?
Mhm.
Wait, it might not be the problem you solve, right? Like people
Mhm.
pay me to get better at singing. But what I solve is not that they're not good at singing, it's how they feel about their singing.
Confidence.
Yeah.
But in aspect, or I was going to say in essence, that's still helping them achieve their original goal.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wouldn't have a business without it. It's just interesting to see how from that point of view, you can only see the obstacle, and the obstacle becomes your goal. And I think actually that is the problem.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's like um I'm trying to think of how to phrase that. Um it's like seeing a wall in front of you and not realizing it's a door. That all you have to do is just figure out how to open it and you can pass right through it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really it. You could say that about life.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's really interesting. Knowing that that is true from personal experience. If we had it like visualized, and I like to make things physical, helps me make things like tactile. So we're like
Hmm.
here. There's a wall here, but we want to be over here.
Hmm.
After going through this time and again, do you feel like there's a sense of almost like a sense of I want to say belonging or awareness that even though you see a wall ahead of you, you don't see any immediate way through. Would you say after seeing this pattern so much, in the face of obstacles, you're still right where you belong?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everything has a time and place, and not saying that everything's like predestined for us in any way, but I think that there are aspects of us that the only way you can move forward is by achieving what you need to move forward. And there's a time and place for everything. So if you're not ready to take that next step, life's not going to allow you to take that next step. Or it's going to kick you back a notch until you figure out, hey, you're not going there yet because you haven't figured out this, and this in order to really get past that. Um, every aspect of what we do is necessary at every point in time. Every mistake you make, every goal you achieve, they're all necessary. I think a lot of people have issues with things like regret of what they could have done better, what they could have changed. But the reality is, if that you knew about those things then it wouldn't have happened. You can't seek change over something that's already done because you learned something new. You didn't know about it then. Things happened. You know about it now. Knowing about it then means that things couldn't happen the way they do now. I guess it'd be if you had the option, like there's an apple, right? You have multiple options in front of you. You can take a bite, you can leave it alone, you can throw it away. But what you do at that moment, you can't go back and change. So if I take a bite of that apple now, and then I realize that apple was poison, that's it. That's your decision, because at that time you didn't know the apple was poison. So you couldn't have changed your decision, because at that point in time, that was the necessary option. None of the other options, technically, although they existed, I don't believe they could have happened, or else you would have made a different decision. But
Yeah.
whatever action you make is going to change the outcome of everything in the future. And I think it's every decision we make is totally necessary. I feel like I'm going in circles though with what I'm saying right now. I guess just there's no need to regret your decisions if you learn from them and don't proceed to do them again. Because there are different, let's say if you feel you made the right decision about something, are you sitting here looking back and being like, well, what if I did the other thing? Like, I regret not making the right decision. Like, a lot of times you're not looking back on that instance and telling yourself that you want to change that decision. If everything feels right in that moment to you and you feel like it led up to everything going well now. You only think about that if you feel like you made the wrong decision. And I don't know, I just feel there's no need to dwell on the past when you can focus solely on the present and how the past can mold you to where you are and where you're going. And it always is molding you in the present. But yeah, I guess just don't worry about the past. It's done. It's over with. Learn from it, but that's about the best you can do.
Yeah. And everyone has experienced regret at some point.
Yeah.
Regret is really one of the biggest drivers of change.
Yeah.
If you accept it.
I agree with that.
And this is actually something I wonder. When I went through that loss with my dog,
Mm-hmm.
I felt regret that I hadn't treated him better, that I hadn't been nicer to him, that I was angry at him, like, from time to time. I was like, he was sick, I had to take him out a lot. I was like, I want to do my work, this and that. I had a lot of regret. Because at that moment, I realized how important he was to me. And there go my chances. But then I also foresaw regret repeating itself if I were to do the same thing with my other loved ones. And that was like, oh shit, I can't do that by any means. Like, you come to terms with a reality.
Mm-hmm.
You come to terms with a choice. How do you feel like that choice has helped you musically?
That's a tough one. I mean, I could say I had a project of mine where I felt that I was going to regret not doing something. And I was given 3 months notice to move from here in Iowa to California and try to get the band going out there. And we did. We made the move. I made the move without better knowing the people in my band and knowing what their life was outside of music. And I lasted a month just to lose my music equipment and come back home. And I would say in that aspect, I don't regret it. I would have regret not doing it, but that has made a huge impact on the way I see things nowadays. Of there's going to be a million chances that you get with everything. I could say that I regret not taking a show that was offered to us to open for the Black Dahlia murder before their vocalist passed away. And you know, there's some aspects of me saying like that would have been a great show. It would have been awesome. We would have been great opening for it. But then there's other aspects of could we afforded to take that show at that time? Were we rushing into things and seeing both sides of it? And yeah, there's minor aspects of I regret not taking that show, but I also don't at the same time. And I think that's just something that we will always battle over and over in everything we do. I battled it with the band and we talked about it and we're like, dang, we should have taken it. I don't think it made any differences in what we did as a band at the time. And if I'm going to focus on like what I do now musically and the regrets I've had for things up to here, I could say I regretted not being the one to record my instrumentals for my first EP. I wrote everything, and a buddy of mine played the instruments, even though I wrote it, and I just did the vocals for it. And there's some aspects of me that says, dang, I regret it. It just doesn't sound the way I want to. But then those aspects of it not sounding the way I want to also positively impact me, because that's where I'm like, if I want things to sound a certain way, I just have to do it. Like, that's my baby. I'm going to write and record it myself. If I want someone else on it, I have to recognize that their voicing of that instrument is going to be different than mine. They're going to have a different influence on how they play it. And it's not going to sound the same. Even if I show them the same riff, there's going to be small inconsistencies as to, like, if you look at it that way. But relative to their play style, it's going to be taking riffs and stuff I've written and turn it into more of their work than my own because of the emotion they put forth into the piece. And that aspect of regret, if you will, kind of built up a positive influence knowing what I want to achieve and how things can change depending on who's involved.
So regret is a painful feeling, uncomfortable at best.
Mm-hmm.
Learning from that discomfort has brought you positivity.
Yes. Not all the time. Not every time I've felt regret. But you have to learn and grow from every situation. And I think aspects of regret have taught me that over time.
Hmm. That's a lot to think about. In my experience, I got to thinking that there's a certain way for me to live my life. If I live it that way, I won't have regrets. Do you feel like that's something that you have been building towards or are living now, being that authenticity is your main driving force?
I would say yes, but external factors will always change your outcomes. So there's always going to be things that you never anticipate. You can say that you don't regret things or you never will, but you never know what factors you're going to run into in the future that will change your mind and change your mindset. I would like to think that I've, you know, I've gotten myself to a point where I've kind of weeded regret out for the most part. And I've seen it as it's a mistake, but I'm learning from it. I don't regret what I did. I don't regret doing things. And I think aspects of regret have kept me from repeating things that have caused me to feel that way in the past as well. So, yes, but also external factors may change and play a role that I can't foresee.
There's always the wind.
Yep.
You can never tell.
Yeah, I can't see that. I can feel it, can't see it.
I love that. Well, I've learned so much. There's so much that the way you think about things and the journey you're on, I just think it's amazing, and I want to see you thrive.
Thank you. I
Wholeheartedly.
I was gonna say I hope for all that for you too. Like I'm glad to see you doing the voice lessons and working with people and helping push them forward. Keep doing that. That's awesome.
I appreciate it.
Of course.
I appreciate it. I'll be eager to hear about the business as soon as things move forward with that. I just want to ask, with everything that you've got going on right now,
Mhm.
is there something that, well, I should say, what is something that you would like people to be aware of?
Um, just in like, are you asking in the aspect of what I'm creating, what I'm building, or just in general?
Oh, yeah. Well, if there's something you feel is more important than what you're building, then by all means, just something you'd like to promote.
Well, one thing I always like to promote is over everything, love, kindness. They go leaps and bounds further than anything else in life. Uh, take care of yourself and other people that you care about. And I think that will do wonders for you in your life, in your journey. As far as, aspects of myself and my music, just going to keep doing what I do. And I'll keep releasing as I go about it. I'm not the kind of person who sits here and plans to release things every, couple weeks here and there. I'll release them when they're ready. And if the world's ready to perceive it, they will. And if they're not, that's okay too. I'll get where I need to when I need to. And hopefully, on top of all this, I plan to write and release a book or 3 as well. That actually is more of a prequel to all of my musical story. Started on the first one, but it's been a couple years in the works, and I just haven't felt the right moment to pick it up again to finish. But hopefully that will be something in the future too.
Hopefully so. I'll be eager to hear about that.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll be listening to all the releases because I love the work. It's inspiring to me.
Thank you.
Not just being a Devin Townsend fan, but I just love hearing exploration of different worlds sonically. I think that's awesome.
Heck yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matty.
Thank you, Tristan.
What a conversation.
Absolutely. I appreciate your
See you
time.
next time.